I have I said before that, I became aware of you because of 90 Feet from Home. And the one thing I actually failed to do a lot of is point out some of the other people who have worked on the project, and you are one of actually the many people that I forget to bring up, as Adam Hampton is really good. I've said a lot of great things about Tom Hallam, Robert Keith, but I never brought you as an actor that people should be on the lookout for, despite the fact what I have felt about your performance, which I felt was very, very good. And I said before that I felt like a lot of that performance that I saw that you did for the character of Scott, if I remember correctly, yeah, Scott,
Yeah.
that there was also a lot of you in that performance as well too, that I've taken away from. And then when I saw Rough Cut, I was like, yeah, I could see the similarities between these two characters. Some handle it a little worse than others, but there was a little similarity that I found in there. So, when I was telling you before in the previous conversation that we had, that I wanted to see if what I saw there was going to be consistent across the board as far as your delivery of, conveying these emotional beats, and then having to showcase a different aspect of your acting capabilities that would be consistent, if you understand, if you get understand what I'm going with here. And when I saw Rough Cut, as I told you before, I loved what you had done there. And when I saw that you had directed it, and then having learned about how what you and everyone else was going through and putting everything together for the amount of time you had with virtually no monetary resources to be able to fund the project, but still turned out top notch, in my opinion, that I felt like that's a story worth having you sharing here, because I think it's important to showcase people that who have the excuse of, I don't have any money, so it didn't turn out as well as I thought it was going to turn out. But when I listened to your story and hearing and having the conversation with all the guys in Outsiders production, I'm like thinking to myself, there really is no excuse for anybody to not make top quality stuff, because having seen what I saw in in Rough Cut, I was floored with the amount of quality that went into that production there. Um, and then when you take the time to watch the story and listen to what the characters are saying, I said in the review, which will be available prior to this episode airing here, but that the writing was the first thing I noticed right away that was top tier. So I always felt like that because there was a good script, everyone else then has something to use as a template to be able to bring up their A game, if you will. So I really feel like that whoever had came across that script, and they've said it before too with our conversation previous to this, that Kenny, Chad, and Jason saw, and they're like, this is fucking good. So we know what we got to work off of here. So I
Yeah.
feel like that if people watch this and see what you have done, that there's literally no excuse why you still can't deliver top quality stuff. So, and I told you before in privacy in our conversation that I've actually been inspired, and I'm not the type of person to feel like I'm inspired by this and that. I don't mean it like in a sense that I'm using that as a way to put you, as an example, but really to showcase that, you know, everyone has their own hurdles. This is the way that you overcame those hurdles, and look how well it turned out. It wasn't easy, but what went behind the scenes to get to that point, which I think for me is actually the more important journey rather than the final product in itself, if that makes any sense. So I hope you don't mind me starting off with having to ask you about your more or less your backstory, because I know you before I think if I recall correctly in a previous conversation, that I'm not sure if you said before that film wasn't something that you were really looking into doing until in the later part of your years, really through your friends. But I was curious about what it was that made you finally commit to the idea of, what, I actually want to do this, or I want to try this here, and if it works, I'm sticking with it.
Man, that's great. That's a great question, and thanks for all the kind words.
Uh,
And there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot we could talk about with what you said. No, it all started with writing for me. I grew up a big fan of movies, but I also grew up in a small town in Oklahoma where, you know, um, where I come from, sports were like really sort of the top of the food chain as far as school and so forth. I played basketball. It left a huge mark on me in terms of discipline and sacrifice. I've said before that my biggest inspiration as a director and probably a filmmaker is was my coach from high
Yeah.
school, 5,000 years ago, because that was whenever you start learning that you're putting in hours when other people are sleeping, or when your buddies are going out having a good time, you're in the gym, sweating and getting broken down to build back up again. But I had started writing as a kid. I was always kind of creative. Comic books were huge. I think probably ended up being a little bit of a precursor to film in terms of a visual medium of storytelling. And I had a full ride to college for creative writing, and they were paying for everything. So on my first senior year, I started taking extra classes, thinking that maybe I would double major in advertising or public relations or something soulless like that. And had a media equipment class, and we had to write a script for like whatever commercial or something. I think mine was for an imaginary cologne. And so we shot this thing, and it was like the Wizard of Oz when Dorothy lands in Oz and everything's color. That's what film was for me. I didn't have any theater coming up or any kind of acting as a kid. And most of my college, Kevin Costner says it in Field of Dreams, officially his major was English, but really it was the 60s. And I think, I kind of think mine was probably like the late 90s, was really my field of study. And, but going into that senior year and taking that class and seeing words come alive, I think I got into writing because of connection. I was a kid of divorce. I was a lonely kid on occasion and was trying to work through stuff. And I think that connection was something that I was searching for. And that's what that probably pushed me into developing that into a way of expressing myself and hopefully being heard and understood. And then being able to take it to that next level where the connection isn't just with the storyteller and the receiver, but with the people that are in it with you. So being able to work on a team with people putting together this stupid cologne commercial that was supposed to be funny.
Was it funny at all though, in your estimation?
Kenny Pitts was in it. So, I mean, I was already working with top-notch talent, yeah, it was, I mean, it was like 30 seconds and a guy gets splashed with cologne and then we threw a bucket of water on him. It was pretty juvenile, but it was a lot of fun. And it was, it was game changer for me in terms of writing something that other people did. And then after that, I think it took a while for that to all set in, but and it, it's like when you find something that you maybe you're not good at, but you love, there's just no coming back from that, and that becomes gravity, and you can fight it, and a lot of people do. A lot of people end up with dreams on the side of the road, but I definitely leaned into it, and I was very fortunate and it's very strange to have my friends who were friends before also sort of come to similar awakenings about the same time. I mean, Alexander, Jason, who, we came up together. He wasn't making films, but we started working on some of those class projects together, and he had previously shown interest in photography. He was very talented, has a great eye, but it was kind of all coming together. All of our origin stories sort of collided at about the same time. And so I was very fortunate to have that. And I would say that, kind of going back to what you mentioned about, there not being an excuse, because you can make things without a lot of money. It does start with a script, but and we didn't have money, but we had each other. And so that's where making those connections with people who are like-minded and trying to develop a community that's supportive of one another becomes so important. You can write on your own, but you can't shoot a movie by yourself. Not if you're, unless you're using action figures and puppets or something.
I was going to ask you because you were saying something before about how if I'm trying to remember correctly how you said it, but the question I was actually going to lead to was that I remember you were talking about how you feel like you were getting better with certain things, or you feel like some things were about what you contribute was really good. Because from my perspective, um, and I hope you don't understand. I hope you don't take it wrong when I'm saying this, but I always felt like that the strongest you are, where you are at your strongest is in the writing, because I feel like that from my perspective, you're an observer, because you mentioned before you were kind of a lonely kid growing up, so it leads me to believe that you probably had a lot of time to look around and observe things, and then retain some of that information that you've come across, and then use that into the narrative in some way or shape or form. Maybe not the entire event, but snippets of that you may recall from a certain period of time. Because I always feel like that if a director is going to be working on a project and they've written the story themselves, it's a 50-50 thing. It's either going to work or it's not going to work for a number of different reasons. But as I said before, considering the circumstances that you guys are being dealt with and having to make a film or a show in this case, that there's virtually no money. And then if people take the time to look at the film and watch it and see it for what it is, they will take notice that there was a lot of work that was being put into this here. And although you can see in some respects some limitations, but the limitations were never the excuse as far as why the project never worked. In fact, it kind of, in a lot of ways, probably helps the appreciation of the amount of work that went into it here.
Yeah.
So I said before that in the previous conversation that I'm actually really surprised that no one's heard about this show before, at least in a much wider capacity, because I understand that the industry can be very fickle. You have to know the right people and be in the right place at the right time under the right circumstances. But I never, despite those protocols that are in place, you come for, at least for me, I've been in a position where I've come across people that have worked on stuff that have been nothing but amazing projects, and I'm wondering how come no one's ever given the opportunity for them to be able to showcase their skills at a much higher level. Because I'm not saying the people that are working in the industry now at this high level here aren't good. They definitely are good, but I notice there's a big difference as far as who's coming into the into this industry now, where these are the guys that were working on independent productions that most people would probably regard as being distasteful or not very good, but somehow they kind of creep up with the ranks, and then they showcase their skills in one area that has been giving them a lot of attention because they've done very well with those set projects, and then all of a sudden it garnered other opportunities for them to be able to do other things. Like James Gunn's an example, who was a guy who worked on trauma films and then wrote a bunch of screenplays that have done very well for a number of different films. And as a result
Sure.
of those films, he's been able to do some of his own movies, which didn't do very well, but someone saw the films, remembered him, and said, "We'll give you an opportunity to work on this one." Then all of a sudden, Guardians of the Galaxy blew up, and now
Right.
he's a household name. But it wasn't like an overnight success, as some people may perceive it to be. It took a lot
Right.
of years for him to get there, but he happened to be at the right place at the right time for all that stuff to work out. But what I find about your story and Outsiders Productions very interesting is that you're all doing it from Oklahoma. And as I said before in our previous conversation, no one's going to think of Oklahoma or many other states as a place to be considered as a home base to make films,
Yeah.
because everyone's associating Hollywood as the go-to place to do everything, and then use other locations when necessary. But in reality, you guys use it because, I mean, not because it's your home, but it probably would make more sense in a lot of ways because it showcases another side of the country that most people may not be aware of. And if given the opportunity and seeing what else is out there, hopefully more awareness will come out and they'll realize that, so who else has done other projects here that we can work with here. And the first up group of people that I hope that people will recognize is, well, Outsiders does a lot of stuff here too, and it's really good stuff. Well, let's check out their work. And when they see, like, holy shit, this is what you guys have done for this whole time, so this entire time. Yeah. How much money did you
Right.
have into that? Nothing. And this is what I mean, like, I really do hope that happens there. So I'm kind of rambling on here, but it's for a reason, because I feel like that, you know, I'm repeating myself again, but what you guys do really did impress me a lot for a number of different reasons. And that's why it took, when I did the review for Rough Cut, I had to filter out a lot of stuff because I kept going on for over an hour. and had to trim it down to make it somewhat presentable for people to understand what I'm trying to get at here, because there's really a lot of things you can get into there with that project. But when you look at when you look at yourself now, and then you look back at what you've done, I know that you're proud of what you've done because you've shared that before in the past. But I'm still curious now for you, if there's a part of you that feels that because of what you've gone through, do you still have a little do you still have a little bit of how was the best way to ask? Are there still some insecurities from that period that still have carried over that you feel like you've handled better because of what you've gone through and because of how things have turned out, knowing that, at certain points, maybe the project wasn't going to work out as well as you thought. And when you saw it, how it turned out, you're like, wait a minute, it was nowhere near as bad as I remembered it. So anything like that goes through your mind when you think about what you've gone through and with where you are with yourself now, especially with all the things you've worked on in the last number of years?
Yeah, man. I mean, like, listen, pain hurts. Pain still hurts. What you learn to do is you learn that it's not going to, getting punched in the face isn't going to kill you. And you get knocked down, you can get back up,
Mhm.
and you're going to have hard times and you get through them. It's a little bit like, when you have your heart broken in ninth grade, that goes deep, man, because you don't have any defenses up yet. So it goes all the way to the center of you,
Mhm.
cuts you all the way down. You get a little bit of scar tissue and you realize, okay, well, she broke my heart or he broke my heart or whatever, but you move forward. Next time you get heartbroken, it's still gonna hurt, but hopefully you've learned that you'll get up and get past it. Now, that doesn't mean you still can't have devastating pain, but hopefully you've developed the perspective to know that you can get past it or you can get through it. Anything good I've ever done in my life has been because of something unhealthy about me. Anything good that I have, any good qualities that I have, comes, for the most part, I would say, um, from someplace unhealthy. So insecurity, yeah, sure. What that can you can take that and use it to try to make yourself better. To not rest on your laurels. It's not comfortable all the time. It isn't healthy. It's not. I don't want that for my kids, but I know that I've taken something that's a part of me and tried to build on it. So in that way, I'm kind of like a shark. Like I feel like if I stop um, swimming, that I'll drown. You know, so that does push me forward, and that has strained. I mean, all three of those guys, with outsiders plus people outside of that very exclusive inner circle. I mean, we've all butted heads. There's been pain, there's been frustration, there's been, you know, brotherhood breakups for, a time here and there. Um, but it's kind of like, that eighth grade heartache, you get past it, when you can get past it. That's part of the beauty of family. Um, and yeah, I mean, like lessons, like if you're not learning lessons, you're not going to be getting any better. And I mean, I've worked with a lot of really talented people, and the most talented people are the ones who are still trying to get better. Once you're plateau and you're happy with a plateau, I mean, you're definitely not going up, and the water's just rising. You know. Um, so I don't know if I've answered your question, but yeah, I mean, I've definitely, I've got fire in me that prevents me from quitting, and it's pretty obsessive. Uh, um,
Would you consider that to be like a healthy obsession in your case?
it's healthier now. I mean, I've learned to balance a little.
Uh,
I've learned to balance a little bit. I mean, I've been I met my wife at the same time I was introduced to filmmaking, and also the first time I listened to Bob Dylan. So it was a big year for me. Um, and there were times where I was so center focused that it certainly put strain on my marriage. The time that I spent away, I think writing is a very lonely undertaking. But I think probably being married to a writer is up there. But whenever you want, so that's tough. And then I have two kiddos, and I think life has caused me to stop and like smell the roses a little bit better. and to try to be more aware of day to day, as opposed to, if I'm not working, I'm dying. So
Yeah.
I need both. My wife realizes it. She's told me, when you're happy pursuing whatever you're pursuing, you're better at everything else. So
Yeah.
that support's pretty crucial.
Yeah, I think my wife said that to me too not too long ago. Actually, that was fairly recently actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think when you and I were chatting in the chat board before, it, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but in a lot of ways I saw a lot of myself in you, because um obviously we've never met before, but when I was watching 90 Feet from Home, like I saw a lot of you in that role. That was the first perception I got. And I think about it now, especially after that conversation we had in the messenger board, that I reflect on that when I said that. I was like, why did I say that? And then I realized, because I think I saw a lot of myself in that person too. So
Sure.
which is it was unique for me in that respect, because I talked to Brett before, and I think you may have seen that episode too, where that's a
Yeah.
film that I just can't watch. Like I can put on, any action film that I love. I can pop it in anytime, watch it, and enjoy for what it is, and then move on with my day, and still get the same satisfaction out of it. But with 90 Feet from Home, it was kind of hard for me to watch, because I saw a lot of myself in that character, and also in Tom's characters too, to some degree. But because some of it did hit close to home for me. But when I saw that performance, like I guess I think the reason why I didn't really take notice of to really point you out is because when I saw that film, I, you know, there was so much that I understood, that I connected with, but and I think I was kind of afraid to admit, at least at that time, that I know what that guy was going through, and I know exactly how it feels. So it was kind of hard for me to really to express that, if that makes any sense. Not that I've not been able to talk before about my issues, but it's not that. It's just that it was difficult for me to accept that you know, I don't know. It's hard, and I think that was one of the reasons why I didn't point you out, because I think I was still trying to comprehend that. But then having time to not seeing the film for some time and then reflect on that, then I noticed all the other things that I remember before about your performances, and you conveying those emotional beats that certainly did help out with the story. But and then again, when I'm talking to you, like I said before, I see myself in you in some degree, not
Mm.
exactly like you, if that makes any sense, but just understanding
Sure.
your your journey. And then when I hear what you guys have gone through, I was like, holy shit. If I had gone down that path, that probably would have been the same exact path I would have gone through too, where I would have done everything for free. I would have worked my ass off. I probably would have been very bitter, and I probably would have been very upset, but I've also would have been very, very thankful that I've got a group of friends that are helping me out. And when I see Fran in Rough Cut, honestly, I see a lot of myself in there. And I've never done what you have done before, but that essence of the character, I see myself in other areas, especially with what I do here. Because even now, as I've got off of work, I'm editing, and then
Yeah.
I see my kid, and he's like, "You're gonna take the dogs out?" Yeah, I'm gonna take them out. Just let me finish what I got to do right here. And my poor dogs are waiting to take a shit, and I'm finishing up with editing.
Yeah.
So I understood that perspective, and that's why I found, like I said before, your story to be really unique in that respect, because quite frankly, I saw a lot of myself in that as well too. So I hope you don't mind me saying that here, but my story is not unique in any way or shape or form, but it's something that I felt like that for the first time in a long time, I felt like I've connected to someone's work at another level, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. So
Well, man, let me interject. I mean, your story is unique, right? I mean, it is unique. And how old's your kid?
my kid is 15. Oh, he'll be 15 this year.
Your kid's seeing his old man chasing something.
Yeah.
Like, that's a beautiful thing.
Mm.
You know what I mean? That's a beautiful thing for your kid, for your neighbor, for your lady, for whoever, to see you chasing something. And I think to, if it makes you alive, and what you mentioned about what your lady said to you about it making
Mhm.
you a better person or something akin to
Mhm.
that,
Yeah, yeah.
man, like there's a line in the episode 4 of Rough Cut that hasn't dropped yet, but that episode focuses a lot on uh, Susie's marriage and why his wife stays with him. It's maybe the best heartfelt scene of the series, where the man and the wife are talking, and she's explaining why she supports him, but that it causes this sort of a forever wall between them, but she still wants him to do it because it makes him a better person. And I mean, I think that is unique. And I mean, we've talked about Play It Loud a little bit, and that's certainly about finding people who, yeah, you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, Adam Aguilar's doing his thing, but like you can recognize somebody that's on the journey, it's on the chase. And there's something about that I find truly inspiring for other people. They don't have to be making movies. They could be, I mean, they could be doing pick anything. Anybody that does something with passion, when they're tired and when they want to go to sleep and when there's something to sacrifice, and that's beautiful to me. I mean, it truly is beautiful.
Yeah.
So I like being in the company of that. I think being around that makes us all better,
Yeah. Well, here's the thing though, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well, because you've experienced it, I'm sure, on many occasions here. For example, like I've started doing this here, and I was actually introduced by chance through a friend to work here with the channel Nerds Rule the World, and I'm always forever grateful for him doing that for me, because um, I think I was at a kind of at a plateau in my life where I just was still trying to figure things out. Um, and I found that out later on in life. And I'm sure for yourself, when you found that what your passion was and you pursue it, it ignited something in you. And from that moment on, with my friend, when he brought me in, said, "You want to do a review for this movie?" And I said, "Yeah." And I look back at the review, I'm like, that was not very good. But I saw what my intentions were, and I remember distinctly thinking that I was preparing, and that was the first thing I can recall, that prepared to make it as good as possible, and I could do it at the best of my ability at that time. And I'm certainly not saying that I'm great, or I'm not trying to toot my own horn or to make myself sound pretentious, but I know for a fact I've gotten better. But I know I've gotten better in the areas that I know that were my strengths, and then the things I needed to work on, I started to work on a little more consistently now, because I started to catch that the common things that I was doing was not only just annoying, but it just wasn't helpful for the product, if that makes any sense. And I'm sure for yourself, when you see that, and then I'm sure you look back and I mean, you might think of something that might drive you crazy, because it certainly has done that for me, where
Sure.
I've literally done something where I spent an entire day on, and then I would go right back to watch and do the playback and start editing. And I'm near that editing. I'm finalizing the editing, the video, and I realized I just wasted my entire time because it was never good to begin with. So I did it all from scratch all over again. And then my plans to go out that evening has changed. So, sorry, babes, I'm got to finish this right now. That was more important for me. So I can understand your perspective when you said about how it could have a strain in the relationship and how it could be very difficult. And I think some guys, or some people, I should say, have to understand it. Not to say that they should sympathize with us. I'm not getting to that, but I think they should understand the fact that they see that there's a passion, but the passion doesn't necessarily lead to anywhere. In this case, in their eyes, as well, you're not making it in Hollywood, and that's why I was in that conversation we had before, that I brought up about the first episode of Rough Cut, where the guy said, "You guys are never going to make it because you're here, and you shouldn't be making it here. You should be making it out there. But even if you get out there, you're never going to make it in the first place."
Right.
And that's the reality of the situation for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people from that perspective will just I think I was talking to a group, Shiva, where they're saying that they go back home to their families and they have full-time gigs, and then all of a sudden their family members are saying, "Oh, how's the little group is working?" Because they're a band. "How's the little band that you guys are doing? How's that working out?" And they don't take it very seriously, because they just look at it as just some little menial, trivial thing. But in reality, that's their passion. And if you listen to what they do, it's like, holy shit, these guys are very, very good. But they're at
Yeah.
a level where no one's going to recognize them, because they're not, Green Day. They're not, the Rolling Stones and
Right.
things of that nature. But the passion's still very much there. And I'm starting to realize more and more that there are a lot of people like that out there who have great, great stories to tell, and great, great passion for what they do. And it's top tier stuff in a lot of ways, sometimes way better than what we get in mainstream media.
Yeah.
but no one's ever going to notice that because they're only accustomed to taking what's presented to them rather than having to go out and dig for this. I mean, how many stories have you heard before of artists that have to go through the catalog to find a band, and then they discover the band and they realize, holy shit, these guys are really, really good. And then
Sure.
that band inspired them. And then all of a sudden they become like the next in this case, let's say Jimi Hendrix or Bob Dylan or Queen or whatever the case may be. And you hear these stories, but no one takes into consideration that what they had to do to get to that point, to discover that, and then get inspired to pursue that.
Oh,
So yeah.
yeah, man. I mean, like, life's about balance.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, my approach to that is, on one, like, I never feel good enough. So whatever I get to,
Yeah.
if tomorrow I got a call to be on, whatever, like, John Wick 17, whatever, like, I would be super, super pumped. But then
Yeah.
if I got to that level, there would need to be something else, because I'm extremely greedy, not for money, but like
Right.
for the chase. Like, it's just like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah. I know what you
always,
mean.
it's, but the other side of that balance, like the side of that, the other part of the scales, is people are stupid. and
You're 100% right. Yeah, I agree.
and so, like, when these, like, it's a tremendous insult to me, and it always has been.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
how's your little filmmaking thing? How's your little movies?
Yep.
How's your this is your hobby? Nah, man. Like, if this was a hobby, then I'm the world's most selfish son of a bitch, for putting my wife through that, for putting my family, for putting my friends through it. At times when I'm dragging their asses to get to set. Like, people in Oklahoma, and it's funny how we can respect it out in LA, or like if somebody came back from, and they were an actor, and they wander into a Shawnee bar and they're out in LA, and maybe they're on a Pringles commercial or something. Well, oh yeah, he's an actor out in LA, and it's a big deal. Okay, well, hey, I'm an actor in Shawnee. Well, what does that mean? That's nothing. And that's even, dude, even like in Rough Cut, there's a reason why the characters are named Fran and Pat and Susie. Like, I gave them all like either androgynous or female names, because I wanted instantly for it to be like, these guys are not viewed as masculine in this world.
Yeah.
Because they're not fixing cars, or they're not wearing MMA shirts, or whatever it is the tough guys do. Like, I literally named them like female or androgynous names, to not even give, they don't even, like, their world doesn't see them as what they're pursuing anything noble, or in this case masculine, because there's a lot of it, I mean, there's a ton of penis references in that series, because a lot of it is about this I'm a man, I'm pursuing this. No, you're not, because you're not fixing cars, you're writing little stories. And so, yeah, part of that develops a chip on your shoulder into somebody who deals with that and gets asked about their little band or their little movie or whatever. I mean, if the chip on your shoulder helps you, keep it. If it hurts you, get rid of it. Forgive, forget, move on. But I mean, if you can use whatever you're getting. If people are loving you, use it. If people are hating you, use it. Whatever you gotta put in your fuel tank to keep going, man, I say do it.
It's funny. You mentioned about the chip on the shoulder. I don't know if you're trying to equate that to ego, if that makes any sense. But I think when people, you hear these stories about a lot of, let's say, well-established, musicians and actors, directors, and so on, and they're really, really good at what they do. I'm still very much a strong proponent that, it's best to be nice to people, even under the worst circumstances. And I understand, everyone has their moments, especially, at least as of this recording, with the whole Oscar situation where, things get out of hand, and one slip up can obviously can stain the rest of your career, because now everyone's going to be talking about it from that one incident, because it's done on a grand scale. But I'm also aware too that, you can't define one person's reputation off that one incident. People have their thoughts behind that, and that's a whole different topic on its own, or conversation on its own, I meant to say. But I think it's also important too, when you mentioned about the chip on your shoulder, that it's, I guess I didn't necessarily look at that way for myself, but I think I understand where you're coming from, but I think how I view it for me is that if you have that drive, and you keep suppressing it, it's gonna come out eventually. And then when it does come out, depending on how I guess where you are at that part of your life, it's either gonna push you in that direction or you're probably gonna be too discombobulated where you just don't know what to do with it. And because you probably had forgotten all about it because you kept suppressing it. And I think that's one of the things that I've come to realize for myself, and I think for yourself as well too, that in doing this here, in a lot of ways, it's going to sound strange for me to say this here, but it kind of made me a better person because I found something to use as an outlet to not necessarily vent out, but to discover things because I'm kind of an isolated person. I really don't go out much at all. And when I do, I find myself to be very awkward in certain situations, not all the times, but in some cases. But I find myself at my comfort when I'm doing things like this, where I can talk to people and I can converse with them. And I'm sure for yourself, where when you have probably started, you may have been awkward at first, but then as the years have gone by, you've gotten so much better with it. Where when you were at the most hot temper and at your kindest, and you figured out, okay, well, I know where my limitations are, and I know where I have to, take a step back and let someone else do the job, or if I have to do the job, be prepared for it mentally. And there's a lot that goes with it. And I don't think it's unique to any one of us here, but and I think it applies wherever you go. Not necessarily just, I don't want to just solely focus on the film industry in that respect, but I think I'm realizing right now as I'm talking, this is about like something a little more deeper than I actually anticipated, which is great. I'm happy for that we're getting to that there, but um
Yeah, it's nice talking to you, man.
yeah, well, because this is why I tell people before in the past that I like these long form conversations because of stuff like this. This is really
Yeah.
important because I've told this before in the past, and if I repeat myself, sorry, but I don't think you're going to learn anything from about you as an individual if we only talk about Rough Cut, if we only talk
Right.
about Charlie Christmas, which I know
Right.
we definitely will, we're touching upon here, but I hate to see interviews where it's a lot of curated stuff, and I understand the reasons for that, but I think we're so far removed from that now that we don't have to be doing that anymore. Because I would hope that people are wiser to know that the film isn't the person, or the actual song isn't the person. Maybe a reflection of the person, but it's not the person.
Right.
So, and that's why it's so important for me now, because my intentions at the beginning were still the same as they are now, but they're not what they were starting off to be, which is, let me just talk to people in the industry. It became later on, it became more about, let me talk to people who are in the industry, but that no one's ever heard of. And will that do anything for my career? I don't care if it does or not. I care about what I want to learn from them about that. And if I'm able to get to another level to be able to talk to people in the industry more or less, then I have the ability to talk to guys who no one's ever heard of. Like, I like it to think of it as a Robert Pattinson who did Twilight, who's made a lot of money for that, very successful, but he's been able to pick projects that most people would never consider watching. Why? Because they're not mainstream films, more or less. They're more character driven stories that most people would probably not care to see, but he's has the ability to do that because he's been able to work on his craft and as a result become a better actor, which he has been a really good actor all these years. But everyone always associated with him and Twilight, especially after he got cast as Batman, and people hated that casting, but they never looked at his work. They just looked at that one thing.
Right.
So I agree with you that people can be stupid, and I still think that it takes a long time for people to understand how that stuff works. But you're never going to find anybody taking the time for that. And I think that's what people like yourself and myself and guys and outsiders and everyone else I've come across here, we, I believe, are in a position where I wouldn't say we know better, but we understand it better. Therefore, we can understand the process, whether we've been through it or not, but we understand the work that goes behind it and respect it. However, we choose to go about it, really shouldn't make a difference. But we understand that what works for them may not work for me, but I can take something from that to become a better director, writer, whatever the case may be. So again, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I think you understand where I'm coming from with that here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you your time to shine here as well. So forgive me for taking away the spotlight from
No,
you here,
dude, please. I enjoy having a conversation, man.
but
I agree with you. Like I agree with you. And I mean, like um like I think part of the reason with Rough Cut, whenever we or not, I'm sorry, Play It Loud,
Hmm.
whenever Beard and I talked about it, I mean, I know when we were on, this applies. I'm all over the place, but like when we were going to film festivals, and like that was kind of a big part of our journey with um, the Cellar and Bowling Alley and Charlie Christmas, and then like the first episode of Rough Cut. Like, you know, we got to a point towards the end of that run where we were getting up in front of people and just being honest. And you know, you go to a lot of film festivals, man, and like those first 3 or 4 questions are brutal. Because it's the questions everybody asks at every film festival. Well, what'd you shoot on? Or what was your budget? Or, you know, how long did it take you to shoot it? When you don't have any names and you're shooting movies like what we make, those are the same questions you get asked every time. How much money did you have? What kind of camera did you use?
Mm-hmm.
And that's about, and it's just like, why am I even here? What, I mean, we just watched my heart up there on that screen, and you're asking me what camera we used. Who cares?
Yeah.
And then, but what happens? And one, it's natural because that's the conversation's got. You gotta start off slow. When I'm doing play it loud, hey, when did you get started making music? How many times have they answered that? Every interview they've ever done.
Yeah.
But then what you hope is that they start to like loosen up, and maybe you have a cold pop or two, or maybe they realize, hopefully, that I'm not just a journalist wanting to space questions. I'm just trying to get them warmed up and comfortable with the group, so then we can start saying, why do you do this? When did you want to quit, and what stopped you? And what do you still love about it? You know, what's still fireworks and roller coasters?
Mm.
But like you have to start small with those questions. And then I think also, going back to something else you said, people who haven't made it yet, I think there's an opportunity for them to be authentic because they're not maybe necessarily having to answer anybody or sell anything.
Right.
Like if you and I were sitting here having this interview, and it's because 90 Feet from Home 2 is coming out, and I'm here to talk about that because my agent lined it up. Well, you know, you can bet we're going to be talking about 90 Feet from Home 2 because that's what we got to talk about. And I'm going to say how amazing Brett Bittman is and how awesome Tom is and what an honor it is to be back. And I'm going to be doing the lines that I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that conveyor belt pressing.
Right. Yeah. But we're able to have a conversation about, you know, what it's really like and what's, you know, and here's the other thing, man, because I'm rambling myself, but I know I have a lot of love for my grandparents, and they both passed on. But like, I used to love sitting with them and asking them questions about the old days. I didn't care about after they retired and they were going on trips, you know, and taking cruises and you know, going to Switzerland or whatever. I didn't care about that at all. I didn't care. Now I wanted them to be happy and glad they went. But like, what I wanted to hear about was the hard times. What was it like whenever you guys had 3 daughters and you didn't have any money and you're trying to figure it out in the olden days, and life was brutal, and tell me how you got past it. That's what I want to hear from people.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's the same way I am with musicians or other filmmakers or whatever. Man, I know it feels good when the spotlight's on you, and you know, I get it. Everybody's wedding day is cool. I want to hear about how you got out of the darkness. You know, when you were in the valley of the shadow, you know, what were you holding on to, or who was holding your hand that led you out of it? And that's what's compelling to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the best pain stories come from people who've been hurt, and who maybe people who aren't spending all their time in spas and being told how amazing they are, you know?
Yeah. You know, I was going to ask you about, because you touched upon before about, you know, asking questions, because I told you before in a previous conversation, even in us chatting on the messenger board, that I did feel that the questions you were asking were rather compelling. And, you know, and one of the things I think I'm just going to say, so I noticed in the beginning for myself, and I'm sure you experienced this too, that when you ask that first question and then you come to that first question you ask was probably not the best question to ask, but you've already asked it. Now you've got to follow up with it with another question that you intended on asking that you realize was not a good question to begin with. So how do you come back from that? And I've noticed when and that's one of the reasons why I don't do an intro for myself, because one, I'm not good at it, but the real reason is because I think it kind of takes away from the authenticity of the conversation. So if I were to, hey everyone, this is Rob Medina, and if I do that in the intro, and then so then tell me about how life was really, if I do it, just it's something about that. There's a disconnect for me. Um, so as I go as I was watching again, I keep bringing this up here, but I saw a lot of myself like, holy shit, he does it exactly how I would have done it too. So
Good.
I had that connection with you in that regard. But what I found rather interesting is that you were able to do the things that I felt were not, and I'm not talking about just you, but I'm talking about everyone, Jason,
Sure.
Kenny, Chad, everybody, that because you guys have figured out what worked through all the productions you guys have gone through together, Play It Loud, in my opinion, at least up to this point, has been the best thing you guys have done so far in terms of production, the camera quality, and things of that nature. But
Yeah.
really, the overall, um, the overall product together, because there's a focus on the person, not necessarily the product. Albeit there is a cap on that show, or at least in the episodes, but I still felt like I walked away knowing something that I didn't, learning something that I had not learned before, or had not known about before, I should say. So, with it's clearly obviously you guys are on the same um train of thought with how you guys want to go about that. But I mean, I'm kind of trailing off here, but with going back to with the whole interview aspect of it. So my question was to you, for you, at really what's trying to get to is that when you first started doing that for yourself, one, were you nervous, right? And two, once you started to get the hang of it, where was that part of that process for you where you realized, okay, I can do this now because I've learned X, Y, and Z? What was that? What was that part that you started to realize that you could actually pull it off, having gone through it through the first couple sessions?
Hmm. That's a great question, man. That's really good. I'm gonna have to steal that from you. Um, yeah, man, I was nervous, kind of, but I mean, like, uh, I'd spend enough time in front of the camera, um, and my approach as an actor is obviously to respect the script of the character, but also try to find some way to be as authentic as possible. And that prevents me, that maybe that's a lack of talent on my part that prevents me from, like, being a Christian Bale, or someone who just Gary Oldman, or somebody who just morphs into other people. I mean, yeah, there's gonna be similarities with some of the characters, uh, because I'm bringing my own. They cast me, so I'm bringing some part of myself into each one. Now, you get pretty different from 90 Feet to Fran, or something like that, or Out of
Yeah.
Exile, whatever. But so I mean, like, trying to be as real as possible on camera is something that I've been doing since we started. Um, and it's with my people, and it's where it's very loose environment. And I've never, I hear Anthony Bourdain in terms of the model that I think Beard and Jason were kind of looking at,
Yeah.
but I've never watched him, so I wasn't like, oh, I've got to match up to anybody. The way I saw it was, I saw it as the scene in Jaws, which is, I'm sitting around with this person or these people, and we're going to compare scars. And I'm going to be showing where somebody broke my heart, and they're going to be showing where some shark bit off their leg or whatever. And this is what it's like to be on the journey. And so, hey, this is what's hard. This hurt. This is how I got past it. And so I just tried to make that as conversational as possible. When that really works, I think, I don't know that there's anything I can do, um, because the show's not really about me,
Right.
to make me look good, other than research and try to listen. Whenever it really hits, though, is when the artist opens up, and either we get a connection, or they just get honest, and they're their authentic selves. And I think the best episodes are the ones where they are, um, loose, and not overly protective, and they get past feeling like it's going to be an interview. Once if I feel like it's hitting, whenever it no longer feels like an interview, and it starts to feel like a conversation.
Yeah.
And especially if they've got any awareness of me as like, okay, well, this guy's acting and he's done some stuff, so that they show me some sort of artistic respect. So it's not like I'm a journalist, but more like, hey, we're two people who are trying to make it. Let's have a conversation.
Right.
Because there's a natural, I think, once you've been burned a time or two, there's a natural sort of defensiveness against somebody, trying to get in your back door, trying to sneak in the house. And so once they realize, hey, we're just here having a conversation, that's when I feel like it stings. And so it's not even me, because I try to make everybody as comfortable as I can every time. And I'm not going to sit around and talk about guitars with them. I don't know anything about guitars. Kenny and Beard can talk about guitars. I'll talk about heartache, or I'll talk about wanting to quit, or I'll talk about, that high when it works out. But I think pushing for that, and that's just authenticity. It's what I strive for as an actor, and it's the same thing I push for as an interviewer, which is I want to just be as honest as I can on camera, and then
What do you ever feel like though? Because I've kind of experienced this for myself, but for yourself though, because you've done the show for a lengthy period of time now, where you're pretty much there's a template more or less about getting to know the artist, especially if one that you've never met before, or possibly never heard of before, where you're gonna have asked the same questions more or less that would have been asked the episode before, but with a different artist. So do you ever get concerned about being repetitive in that respect, and in coming off being redundant, where maybe you may feel like you've probably have plateaued because you're more or less doing the same thing again,
yeah.
but having fun to come at a different angle? Because like I said before, I've kind of felt that for myself. But what's unique for me in this respect is that it's a long form conversation, but with the show, on the other hand, there's a cap, and you have to be able to find, I would imagine with what you guys are going through, having to pick out the best topics that were discussed, or if maybe they weren't necessarily the best topics, but it's the one you need because it covers a integral part of the person's background or their career path that you as an audience will get to learn more about them, and then try to fill that with something else to kind of make up for that lost momentum, if you will. Like, do you have anything like that you've experienced for yourself along the way with that?
Oh man, again, I mean, like I'm plagued with what Crash Davis in Bull Durham said, you got to play the game with fear and arrogance.
Mm,
Like, I really seesaw with a plum between feeling like I know what I'm doing and, oh man, I'm screwing this up. Because there is a format, and there is, okay, here's kind of the approach that I'm taking, and I'm going to try to go in easy, and then hopefully we talk about something that really matters. When they're not taking that bait, or whenever it's like it feels like pulling teeth, or all they're doing, and it hasn't happened very often, but if it feels like all we're getting is somebody selling an album and giving the canned answers, then I'm like, I'll kick myself for not going further down a different rabbit hole or whatnot. But it's a dance, man.
yeah.
More than as well as I do, if not
Yeah.
more, that an interview is a dance. It takes two people, and you can ask the most amazing questions in the world. If all I'm doing is saying yes and no and go see my movie, interview's gonna suck.
Yeah.
And likewise, if I'm sitting here ready to be like, hey, I really want to, let's really talk about why we do this, and you're saying, what camera did you shoot it on? Then we've messed that up too. I mean, you gotta have both parties, and when it happens though,
Yeah.
man, it clicks. There've been several of those, man, where I've walked out of episodes with like a person I consider a friend, because it's like, it's you recognize, like you said, you recognize yourself in other people, whether it's not exactly, but like, okay, I get what they're saying. I get that the chase, man. I get that, it's almost like when you have kids and or you get married or have kids, any major step. And it's like, there are people who have done it And when I was single, I knew all about marriage. I knew all about marriage, and oh, they're screwing it up. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then I got married, and I realized I don't know what I was talking about at all. And it's the same thing with then somebody has kids, and you're like, oh, they're terrible parents. Oh, they're doing that and this and that and the other.
Yeah.
And you don't know it, and then you have kids, and you're like, I'm doing the same thing. Like, and until you walk through that doorway, you don't get it. Well, it's different, but it's similar. Like, you know, you can, because then you could be the tired dad at Walmart at 3 a.m. going to get formula or whatnot, and look over and see another tired dad with bags under his eyes in his pajamas doing the same thing. You're like, I know you, dude. I get it. And that's the same way. That's the same way that it is with pursuing anything outside of the, you know, whoever says is normal. I mean, whoever sucks. I don't care what they have to say. I don't at all. You know.
I was going to ask you, is there anything that you've done? And I'm not necessarily talking about like the films or, you know, in this case, Rough Cut. I'm talking about like an approach, let's say you may have had that you felt like may have worked before. So for example, like in this case, let's kind of use the interview tactics that you have to prepare for the episode. So when you are going through the motions of asking the questions and you realize for yourself that, you know what, this didn't work before. I mean, excuse me, this worked before, but it's not working for me now. I've got to change something. And I guess because I'm trying really hard how to ask the question, because it worked in my head and I'm trying to say it out loud. It doesn't come out as clear. But do you have a moment in your life, or in this case with your career, where you realize that, okay, I can actually do this here because now, not just from the experience, but for something that I took for granted, or maybe I thought this approach worked well for someone else, tried it for myself and it worked, but didn't really work for me. And I found out what works better. And I realized, you know what, I can actually do this here because of that experience that I've gone through. I hope that question makes sense. Like I said before, it made sense in my head, but I hope it made sense as I'm asking you out loud.
Well, I think I mean, like, I think I get it. You ask very thoughtful questions, and I'm kind of a dumb guy.
I don't think you're dumb at all. I feel like a dumb guy trying to ask questions that I think are compelling, but in my mind, I'm like,
it's a very compelling idea. I think I've been fortunate in my experiences to have found that different pursuits have fed into other pursuits. So like, I think I started out with this whole filmmaking thing as a writer, right? And then Jason came to me and said, hey, let's do this. And I said, cool, I'll do it if I can direct it. He's like, cool, I'll produce it and shoot it. Well, my writing fed into my directing. So like, okay, I had a perspective and a voice that I knew I wanted to try to approach it with, you know, or a vision, I guess. And then I acted in it. Well, I acted in our first movie, Looking for Hope. One, I kind of wanted to try the acting thing because I've spent most of my life trying to pretend I was either Kevin Costner or Harrison Ford. But I also knew
Razor Ramon, right? Because I know you're a big fan of him.
Hey, dude, that's my next tattoo. Yeah. But I knew that I wanted to try that. But I mean, I was casting myself in roles because I knew I'd know the lines and I knew I'd show up. When you're not paying anybody, that's priceless.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like this big plan to be an actor.
So it's kind of by default is what it sounds like to me. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it was. Now I absolutely, truly love it. And it's a whole other love in itself, a whole other passion in itself. But what you find is you're like, writing and the way to approach a script helps me as an actor, because now I look at a script that somebody else has written a certain way, or with Bentman, say, or Kyle Harris, or Belgard, whatever. I'm able to look at these scripts and approach it and from different perspectives. I'm also able to do that as a director. So when I'm acting a scene, I'm able to sort of picture, okay, this is how we're going to approach this. This is how I fit into the puzzle, because a lot of times you start thinking as an actor, well, it's all about me, and it's not. It's about the whole story. It's about servicing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing I think as an interviewer. Like those experiences as a filmmaker, those experiences at film festivals, being asked questions that were soulless, and then giving canned answers myself. I mean, we like I've literally told some of these cats that like, hey, basically the first three questions at a film festival that we've been at are garbage, and I'm like, this is the fourth. I want to jump into the fourth and fifth and sixth question, which is whenever we were showing Rough Cut, and I was tired and honest, man, we were being straight with people at film festivals. I mean, we weren't Shane Josephing, but filmmakers were responding to that film, and we were up there being honest, saying, if you want to quit, maybe you should quit. Like, this is hard, and we love it. And but if you, like Kenny said, if Shane Joseph makes you want to give up, maybe you should. If it makes you want to fight, then lace up your shoes and get to work. You know, all of those experiences lead into my interviewing style with Play It Loud, because Kenny and Beard both know vastly more about music than I do. They're both musicians. Jason is a hipster. He knows way more about the indie music scene of bands in Oklahoma that nobody's ever heard of. I'm like the dude that like sits out in his truck and listens to Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen on dirt roads. And I come in and I'm like, oh, hey, okay, I like this song. Why do you do it? Like,
but I don't mean to cut you off. See, that's why, when I had that conversation with you guys earlier, this is why I think you guys are so unique in that respect, because you have the guys more or less behind the scenes that are very knowledgeable in that respective side of the industry with these musicians that know the technicalities of the guitars and whatnot, and then
yeah,
Jason, more or less knowing about the indie scene, if you will. And this is a guy who has no, I wouldn't say connection to that, but just has no knowledge in it. But you come from a neutral position, and that to me is extremely unique. And it also helps out too that you have a personality to go with it, to be able to converse and try to get something out of the guests you're speaking with here.
yeah.
So if anything, I hope you don't mind me cutting you off, but I did that because
Oh,
I'm trying to say to you that you're really good at that, and I'm giving you your flowers
oh,
to
thank you.
commend you for that, because you've done a really good job. And for those who may have not seen the previous episode before, but you guys have won Emmys, and when I've heard, I was like, well, deservedly so, because you guys truly did earn it. So I think with what you guys have been able to pull off here, in respects to how you handle your position and how Kenny and Jason and Chad all do their respective jobs in that production there, it works very well. It works succinctly with
Good.
each other, and you guys have done a really phenomenal job. But clearly, you are the man in front of the camera, and you are more or less kind of guiding the ship, if you will. That
Yeah.
I think, if people take notice of that, we'll see that they probably won't even think twice that you had no idea who these guys were, because you come up as someone who does, and come up as someone who's genuinely interested in their journey, and then having to ask questions to get them to share their story. So
Yeah.
there is I wouldn't say it's a talent behind it, but it's either you have it, or if you don't have it, you learn to develop it. And if you really truly are passionate about it, it will continue getting better. But I think you've gotten better as each episode progresses from each
Well,
season, I would
thank
say.
you.
So yeah, I'm rambling on, but I'm saying this because you are really that good, and so is everyone else in helping out with that production as well too. So you guys more than deserve your flowers, in my opinion. So
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
yeah,
It's a great team, and I mean, I will say this, that like, um, uh, and Jason Alexander does the editing, and and the shoots, and the visuals of it, the tone of it. He and I speak each other's language.
yeah,
So I'm able to line up my writing with what he does, and he's very good at what he does. I mean, and I'm a big fan of his work. But also, Beard, speaking to Beard, like his whole thing with it, which I think is important, is to try to create a mixtape. I mean, he wants different genres. It's
yeah,
Oklahoma. Like, I could throw this bottle out my window and hit a country band, and a very talented country band. That's just that's our, it's in our blood around here. So he has to really work to try to get different types of musicians and artists in front of that camera. And so whenever these are showing in Oklahoma or in this region, or we're promoting them around here, a lot of these people might be big in their subculture, but like, there might not be a giant collective of people in Shawnee waiting to hear a funk band. And so me trying to approach it from like from a very basic level, and not talking a bunch of inside baseball, but like, I mean, I tell the artists, it's like, hey, we're going to pretend that like this is our first date. Like, I'm coming into this bar, you're up on that stage, you're on a break at the bar getting some water or a drink, I'm drinking a beer, and I'm going to start talking to you. And that's how I want to approach it. And I think that's a great way to try to introduce people who don't know the bands, because that's my goal is to, I want some grandma to hear a rapper that she's never heard of, and like be compelled enough by their story to sit around and listen to the songs.
Yeah. I want to. I hope you don't mind me transition to this other aspect of your about your life, because I had heard in one of the episodes that your favorite band of all time is Counting Crows.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is interesting for me, because I know you mentioned before that you're a big Springsteen fan. I'm a huge Springsteen fan myself. I still have cassette tapes from like, from Born in USA. I mean, just a shit ton of stuff. And I think a lot of people.
Good for you, sir.
Yeah, I thank you. But what I was trying to get at was that so when I heard you say that, like, my favorite band of all time, Counting Crows, I was like, really? And I'm not saying that in a negative light. I was just blown away, because I initially thought that you were going to say probably more the likes of like Bob Dylan, or even to some degree like Bruce Springsteen. I was thinking more along those lines of those type of musicians that have compelling stories. But to hear you say Counting Crows honestly was more or less left field for me. And then because of when you said that, I went back to go listen to Counting Crows songs, and I was like, oh, I can see why he likes them. They're great storytellers. They're a phenomenal story. And I failed to realize that as many times as I've heard of their music, but it never really took the time to invest and really pay attention to that stuff. So because of you, I went back to listen. I was like, oh yeah, I'm a fan of these guys too. So, but again, I'm pointing that out because I was actually curious, if you don't mind me asking, about what it was about that group, apart from them being great storytellers, that made them to be your favorite of all time.
Oh man. And I have to stipulate, they're my favorite band of all time. Now,
Right.
Springsteen and Dylan, I mean, those guys are all up there.
Right.
But the Counting Crows to me, one, I'm a nostalgist, man. Like, I can set sad about yesterday, and all the things I've lost since then. But August and Everything After, their first album, to me is perfect. And it also came out, I think, around 94, which means we got it in Oklahoma about 95, because we ran about a year behind everybody else in terms of culture. And I had one of my good friends loved them back then. I did not listen to them a bunch. I was all into House of Pain.
Yeah.
But then, man, I picked it up, and the lyricism to me and the storytelling, with especially some of that early stuff. And they just put out an album not long ago, and it's also fantastic. I caught them live in Arkansas. Man,
are they good live, by the way? Because I've never seen a concert of them at all.
Yeah, man, they change. They play with their lyrics a lot. Adam Duritz, the singer and writer and stuff, he plays with the lyrics a lot. So if you're wanting to go in and hear the radio version, you're probably going to be in trouble. But like, man, it's a feeling, and there's a sort of a real raw emotional thing that he does that it feels very it might be protected as hell, but it feels very honest. And I think it's just as I get older, man, I'm a pretty emotional cat, and I try to keep tuned into that. My wife the other day said something that she was saying something about adulthood, and she bemused that I had like a childlike wonder, and it was kind of an insult. but then she qualified it, because she's like, but it's what helps you with writing and acting and all this other stuff. So I think there's just something about the way that the guy wears his heart on his sleeve, but some of the imagery, man, and even the songs that have kind of got overplayed on the radio, Mr. Jones and Around Here, Rain King. I mean, I've got Rain King tattooed on my arm,
Oh wow.
because I'm a mope. But I just think I think there's such uh, uh, earnestness and poetry in this stuff, man. I
Right.
mean, you come over to my house, we'll sit around the fire, listen to some Counting Crows and Howl at the Moon, my friend.
What's your favorite song by them so far? I would imagine that you maybe there might be one that you like more than other on certain days, but is there one that you look at that you would go to the most to, I guess, use as a point of
Yeah.
reflection?
Well, I'll tell you, my favorite song of all time is a song called "The Trapeze Swinger." It's by a group called Iron and Wine, but you should look it up.
Okay.
I literally got a trapeze swinger on my arm because of it. It's and that's my go-to, but it's when it's covered by a guy named Gregory Alan Isaacoff. You can find it on YouTube. Friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters, children and friends of all ages, go check out the Trapeze Swinger. Gregory Alan Isaacoff, or it's written by Sam Beam from Iron and Wine. Lyrically, that song just breaks my heart. But man, Mr. Jones. I mean, I told Jason Alexander that he's my Mr. Jones. He's the guy that I'll be sitting around with a barrio with and arguing about who the girl's looking at, you know. But there's an aspect to that song, man, and I think that you would get it. I think it would resonate with you based on just our conversation earlier. Like when he's talking about wanting to be loved, and maybe if I get on TV when everybody loves me, that's I'll be happy.
Yeah.
And these dreams of being of finding that home. I mean, man, that cuts me. That gets me. That's
Exactly.
wanting to be understood. Connections where it all started for me, and wanting to be loved and wanting to be Bob Dylan. I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah.
So I know it's like so 90s dad to say that's your favorite band, but I mean, those are my people. August and everything after, and like Springsteen's Nebraska are like,
it's a great
I don't
album.
think you can touch those. You can't touch those out. The storytelling, you can't touch it.
It's funny you mentioned about, because we're talking on subject on storytelling, but because I can't remember who I had a conversation with about this, but I think the conversation about lyrics came up about a song, and I told somebody that I forgot what song it was, but I remember telling them that I don't listen to lyrics anymore because I'm not sure if it's because with whatever the person is saying that I have not paid attention to, I don't feel like it was interesting enough for me to delve into and listen to what they have to say, because the way things are right now, especially where people's opinions are kept from afar because they didn't have the ability to voice it from one location for everyone else to hear their thoughts, right? It's almost as if, though, in a lot of ways, I feel like the art form of storytelling to some degree kind of lost its way a little bit. And I'm not saying to it totally, but to some degree, because if you look at musicians now, someone is either going to be beefing with somebody for one reason or another, and they're expressing their thoughts in a form of a tweet or an Instagram in some way or shape or form. And then by the time they get to the song, we already know the whole story, if that makes any sense. So, but for yourself though, do you feel like that has kind of lost that sort of the art form of storytelling and songwriting kind of lost itself a little bit? Or do you think that it's still only around because guys like County Crows are around, Bruce Springsteen are still around, Billy Joel, even though he's not making any music anymore, at least newer music, I should say, but they're still around, where the lyrics to the song because what they had to say was so unique because it came from their perspective, and then the story resonates with everybody, whether one song resonates more than the other, but you have something you can connect with because it was appealing, because it wasn't disrupted by some other nonsense that would distract you from listening to the song and listening to the words, if that makes sense. Do you have a perception of that for yourself?
Man, I think there's tremendous artists out there. I just think we don't know about them,
Right?
Which comes full circle. I think there are those people that are still making pure, amazing music, But we're not hearing about it because of all the noise. I mean, like I was talking about this the other day, where like before I had a cell phone, I didn't want a cell phone. My wife made me get one because I didn't want anybody to know where I was in my truck when I'm driving down some dirt road feeling sorry for myself. Um, and then of course, if you make movies, you gotta have a cell phone, so people can call, or you can call them, ask where everybody's at and why aren't they there on time. But I know that, like, I used to, whatever job I had, I always had paper, I always had pen. I was writing down lines of dialogue. I was writing down lyrics to a song. I was writing down an outline for a story. Um, and then you get, there's a comfort in the buzz of distraction, because you're not having to think, and you're not really, and then what you don't realize is that takes away, it starts to eat at your capacity to feel. And so, like, I've said to my wife, like, the happiest man in the world is the guy who can fall asleep to silence. If I lay down and the world is silent, man, all I got are worries and fears and everything I haven't done, and all the things I'll never do. So I got to listen to somebody arguing with somebody or whatever on YouTube to crash out. I think we get lost in distraction. I think I probably would have written 10 more movies if I didn't have an iPhone. But it's easier to, like, scroll Facebook, which, thank goodness for Facebook. I mean, we probably still wouldn't be making movies, but, like, we meaning indie people at my level. But I think boredom is just like the best, like, most necessary evil of all time, and silence, and instead we're overwhelmed with distraction. So we're not writing those stories, and maybe because of there's so much buzz, we're not hearing those voices that otherwise we could hear. But it's just so much easier to tap on whatever headline and figure out who Kanye's arguing with now, or what movie is going to be the worst movie ever, instead of, like, looking for real things.
Yeah.
It's fast food.
Well, yeah, I agree with you on that too. But I think when it comes to art form, and I'm talking about art form as in, like, comedy, stand up, music, films, television, writing, whatever the case may be. There was a part of there was a point in time I remember thinking that none of this is going to be relevant anymore because we're so consumed with everything else other than ourselves, if that makes any sense. So, I started to realize for myself, and I'm bringing myself in, and I hope you don't mind, but what I started to learn for myself along the way is that I came to a point where, when I was starting to do this, that I was doing it because I wanted to do it, but I think I had a kind of a misconception about why I was doing it. And then the more I started doing it, I started realizing, oh, I'm discovering myself along the way. So
Yeah.
the self-discovery in pursuit of the passion made me realize that I really love this and I really want to do this here. Because you said it before about how when you do something you love, in a lot of ways you block everything else out. Like there's nothing else that's distracting. Like my wife can walk into the room right now, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but I probably wouldn't have noticed her because I'm talking to you until she starts waving her hand. I'm like, oh, hey, how you doing? And so
Right.
I'm sorry, babies, if you listen to this, but I think that what I'm starting to realize a lot of days now is that if you can tell who's in it purely for the passion of the art form, if you will, and they have a certain connection that they have in doing what they do because they love it. So that's why I'm always interested in talking to people as yourself, is because, again, when people have a notion about, oh, you're an actor, but again, oh, you're an actor. Oh, so in Hollywood, no, I'm in Oklahoma. What? They have this almost like a disappointment behind it. Like, oh, so I thought you were acting in films in Hollywood and you had a part, I've done starring roles. I've done stuff like that. How come I've never heard of the movie? Well, it's an independent film. Oh, well, that makes sense. There's a preconceived notion behind all that. But the thing is that because people have that perception and they don't take that seriously, they're a lot of times starting to realize is that they're projecting a lot of their themselves about the expectations and the I guess the insecurities to some people. But I think it's really important to highlight the guys who are most people would probably consider as underdogs, and those are the story that I'm most interested in here because, like I said before, when I asked to talk to you, I wanted to hear your story. I want to have you to fill out the gaps of what I perceive of my perception of you, and then having kind of fill in the gaps to kind of flesh it out a little more, in hopes that people will understand your story here. Even though this conversation right now is me just mostly talking at this point, but I think it's
No,
important
you make
to.
a point.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think it's important to listen to stories like this, and and I think when people don't wonder why are you doing this when you're not getting any sort of monetary compensation or any sort of rewards that will take your career to another level, and why you're still doing this here, and those people, in my opinion, have the most experience and will have the most compassion and have the most patience, to I would say, to a degree, the most understanding and just the overall understanding the process, but not just in the art form, but in life in general, because they understand that it's not going to be easy. And then when you learn that you have to handle yourself better in one situation that you failed miserably in, and having the opportunity to handle it better in another situation because you've had that experience, it makes you a better person, and it makes you a stronger person too. And the things that you've noticed are a major flaw in yourself may actually benefit you in helping you to propel in other areas that you lacked in, and then use that as a drive force to excel in. So,
Mm.
you know, um, I don't have any perspective on like, to kind of come across as like some sort of philosophy. That's not my position, but I think with what you've been able to share with me so far, um, I don't take that stuff for granted. So, and I know we're all over the place with it. And this is why I love these conversations that we get to
Yeah.
have here, because you just don't know how they're going to turn out. So, I appreciate you allowing me to do this here. But I guess what I want to roll into next year is something that I hope you are willing to share with me, and that's this. So we don't have to say the film if you don't want to, but when I had messaged you before, hey, I'm checking out these movies, I came across this film, that film, this film, and you said, man, I avoid this movie. So I'm curious from your perspective, and having someone come across and say, hey, I've checked this said project here. Having to deal with something like that, where maybe you're not the most proud of, you're proud of what you've done, but as far as getting the job done and putting in the effort that's required, but maybe not so proud of the actual outcome of what you guys
Yes.
have worked on. But from your perspective, if you've dealt with that before in other projects, and then knowing how to deal with it then, not knowing how to deal with it then, and learning how to deal with it now, how has that changed for you in learning how to adapt or having to deal with it when someone brings it up to your attention? And I know you're more than honest about how you feel about it, but I would imagine that a respect for, because that's why I'm doing this here, because I'm not sure if you were comfortable in bringing up the film that I'm talking about, but out of respect for the people that you've worked with here, I mean, do you have a perception about, I don't give a shit, I'll say whatever it is I feel about the film, and they understand where I'm coming from, so it's out in the blue? Or do you still have a perception of, out of respect for my peers here, that I'm not going to say what it is, but yes, said project was not good because X, Y, and Z? Like, I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
Oh man, like I I I have it's a great question. That's a really good question. No, man, I respect everything I've been a part of. I have respect for the people who did them. Now, there might be filmmakers that I'm not working with again for whatever reason, or actors that I don't care to work with again for whatever reason. But like, man, it takes a village, right?
Mm.
And you work on a like, it's like when I hear sometimes actors say, well, I don't ever want to watch the movies I'm in. Well, I mean, I kind of get it, but then I'm also kind of thinking, well, what about all the people that worked on it with you? You're sitting here saying, I'm never going to watch it. and you're not that special. And there's something about that that kind of just, all right, man, everybody teach their own. I just think that even like the worst movie in the world had a crew that worked hard on it, or had a writer that believed in it, or a director. Now, maybe one of those people didn't. Maybe somebody didn't care. Maybe somebody phoned it in. Maybe somebody saw it as some sort of joke. But I mean, everything I've ever been a part of, I was surrounded by people who were working hard to put it together. There's stuff of my own that I've done that doesn't hold up the way that I wish that it did. So there's stuff that I've written and directed that I'm like, man. And if somebody that acted in one of those pieces ever came out and said, never watch this film, it's garbage, I'd be insulted, and I would be insulted for the other people that worked hard on it. But that said, man, I mean, like, there's been stuff there's roles I'm glad I didn't take. There's roles I'm super proud of that that didn't do as well as I hoped, or whatever. But I really do look at it kind of like it's all part of the journey,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's stuff that, like, if somebody saw just one film of mine, I would be like, please watch a different one. And it doesn't matter if it's the one I'm most proud of or not, but it's like, hey, let me show you what else I can do. In 90 Feet, it was a very specific character. In Out of Exile, which was the last feature I was on, that's a very specific character. Fran's closer to who I am in terms of being sort of verbose and annoying to his friends, and occasionally, on a liquid diet. But like, it's always like, hey, check out something else. If you love that, check this out too. But there's, not everything anybody makes is gold,
Right.
Yeah.
I know. Well, so I'm curious about your perception on critiques for that matter, because I mean, understanding that I used to think that that's just the name of the game. That's just part of the business, and it is. But I don't necessarily agree in that with that preconceived notion that that's just the way it is, so you have to accept it. I really don't agree with that anymore, if that makes any sense. The reason for me, and I'm going to ask a question to you, is because, like you said, a lot of people have worked very hard on a number of projects. I've had I'm sure you saw this episode too when I talked to Brett about Operation Overlord. I didn't like the film, but is
It's
it a
true.
shitty film? No, it's not a shitty film, but I'm not gonna say the movie sucks and it's awful. You should not. I will not say that because I know, because I've never made films, but I do know how hard it is to make this film. But if you understand the stipulations that were behind in making the films, the amount of time they've had, how much resources they've had, and what they were able to pull off, you got to give them credit, because most people would never be able to accomplish that, and these guys have. And however you perceive it, it doesn't really matter. But respect the process, respect the filmmakers, whether you like the film or not. Respect that, because it's not an easy thing to do. So my perception on critiques has changed a great deal. And this is actually rather recently, where I used to be so hard on films, not so much now. And I'll still have an opinion if the movie sucks. Yes, I'll say it sucked, but I'm not going to say it sucked because they suck. It's just the way it turned out didn't turn out very well.
Right.
So my question to you in that respect is that when you are hearing something about your projects, where there's a project you are not very much proud of in terms of like how it turned out, but or a project you've worked on so hard on and it's good, and someone says, well, that's garbage. How do you
Yeah.
handle that for yourself? And how did you handle before, and how do you handle this now?
Oh man, that's a great question, and that's a question I think everybody that puts himself out there needs to be prepared for, or be ready to get prepared for, or to consider. One, man, I think I mentioned my coach earlier. Coach
Mm,
Dodd was mean. He was a scary MF, man, and I had a lot of love for him, but it was respect and it was tough. And if all he did was clap and say you're the greatest of all time, never would have gotten any better. So like I respect critique. I also think it's important as a writer, because somebody somewhere said it, and I guess it got chiseled in stone that writing is rewriting. Well, rewriting just for the sake of rewriting is a waste of time. It's got to get better. And the only way it gets better is to realize there were mistakes or flaws and try to reduce those while you try to enlighten or heighten whatever was working. So that requires some hurt feelings sometimes. Hey, this doesn't work. This character's not, it's not happening. You know, I think the first critique I ever saw online about my acting was that I had no charisma. I was, or maybe the worst actor of all time. It was one of those. And those, you know, Shark Penis 69 writing that, it hurts. And I want to go find Shark Penis 69 and punch him in the face. You know, people that are just saying nasty things to say nasty things. Now, I've also on occasion read a critique that was like, okay, well, that's fair. They pointed out weaknesses in whatever I'd done, whether it was the writing or acting or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then you also kind of get to a point where you might get praised, and that feels really good. But if all you're doing is waiting for that validation, even that as a guy whose whole thing is connection, this reason I started writing, the reason Play It Loud, what I do there, and what I push for in every project I do is connection. Like you've got to dam it up a little bit, and the praise can't feel too good, and the critique can't hurt too bad, and you can be aware of it. If you got to read that stuff, but then you got to let it go. You can't, I mean, if you, man, it's hard because I grew up small town, wanting everybody to like me type of thing. There are people that no matter what I do, they're going to think I suck for whatever reason. It might be my face, it might be my ability or lack thereof. It might be my skin color. It might be my height. I mean, it might be my crooked nose. They're going to hate me regardless. So I've got to try to just do the best that I can. The only time that now I think that I really, really take it personally is if it's directed at somebody else. I had somebody had gotten on one of the YouTube videos for Play It Loud, and I had an artist text me, and she was laughing about it, basically that somebody had said something that she couldn't sing, or it was just some stupid, dull insult. And they commented on the YouTube, and I got on there and let them know what I thought about them and their mom and their kids or whatever. And I got on there and just responded that, you know, I think I made fun of their spelling or something, but it made me pretty hot that somebody would talk like that to somebody that we were trying to give a spotlight to that deserved it and had earned it. Yeah. And then I think Beard found out, and he went and took down the comments. But yeah, I mean, it sucks, man. I mean, like, it sucks. But then, like, if you're sitting around and all you're hearing all the time is how great what you're doing is, and it's not real, it does. That's easy. That's and you don't get anywhere, and maybe you get a false sense of ego, and that is poison. That is poison. So I mean, I've been insulted plenty to my face, on the internet, on whatever, with whatever I've done, with whatever I've worked hard at, and it stings because whatever project it was, if it was the worst thing I was a part of, it was the best. That was sacrifice. Yeah. And that was time. And that was time away from my family, time away from my wife, time away from my kids, time where I was going to my day job and not sleeping and giving everything I had to something. And then for, you know, somebody in the comfort of their toilet, looking at their Facebook, decided they're gonna throw a thumb insult at me. Yeah. I mean, that, you know, that is what it is. But I only really get real hot if it's about somebody else. I mean, I've kind of learned to
kind of brush it off.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it helps that my wife is is avidly not a fan of what I do. So like there's I've got like a separate like
My my wife is the exact same way too. She can give two shits about what I she's
she
happy
does.
that I love it, but
That's
she's
it.
like she's like, you know, go on with your day. I'm like, all right,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's it. Like if
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a script reading and I'm gonna have people over at the house to like read a script and hear it out loud,
Yeah.
she's all about hosting a party. She couldn't care about the script.
Yeah.
It's just not. I mean, she's been around it too long. She's just, hey, go do your thing. She'll
Yeah.
probably, if she hears this, she'd be unhappy I said it, but it is what it is, and that keeps you grounded.
Yeah.
Um, as much as I wish that she would like, act a little more like a groupie, I guess I'll settle for. I guess I'll settle for a wife.
I love that. All right. Well, because I know you're gonna be short on time in a little bit here, but so here's what I want to say in closing with us here, because I've said it before in the beginning that I really wanted to give you your a spotlight on you, because I really found your story rather unique. Okay, and I've I'm pretty good at getting a feel for a person, especially when in this case, when you and I were conversing in the chat there, where we were just kind of getting to, you were sharing, my thoughts on what I thought of, on the projects you worked on, and you give me a little bit of insight about yourself and a little bit of us about the backstory of the production and so on. That a lot like with what I felt with Brett when him and I were first chatting the very first time, that I was like, this is going to be a really good conversation, and I really wanted to keep that momentum going, and that's why I wanted you to have give me the opportunity to speak with you. I keep saying me give you, because I feel like it's so egotistical for me to say that, but so if anything, I want to say to you again, thank you again for really making great work. Rough Cut, Charlie Christmas, 90 Feet from Home, which I think is a fantastic performance. um uh, I'm going to bring this film up here too. I like what you did in Jurassic Games. I thought that was a fun movie. So, and then
Yeah,
there's
it's a lot of fun.
yeah, well, and there's a lot of other things that I have not come across you've done as well too. So, and unfortunately, because the amount of time that I've had to be able to provide that, it kind of limits there. But what I have come across here so far with what you have done and outside of productions too, um, I don't necessarily like. Probably it's not that's probably not the best way of saying it, but I don't necessarily look for inspiration. But when I find it, and I find it in a place where it genuinely comes from an organic experience, I love that form of inspiration. Because when I saw what you guys had done and learned what you've done, I was like, holy Christ, this is incredible. And people need to know about this stuff. And I think that is worthy of someone to be able to share that. And hopefully people will catch on and give you guys your flowers, whether it be through a form of an opportunity or some form of adulation, to showcase that they appreciate what you're doing, and then hopefully that will come to with more opportunities down the way. But um, I honestly can't give you enough props, because you have done so good at what I think you are so good at what you do, and I honestly believe your guys are going to get better and better and better as a result of what I've seen so far up to this point. So I'm not sure if there's anything that you may want to say in closing here, but if there's anything else that you are able to share with us here about what it is that you are working on, that you are able to kind of point out to people to be on the lookout for, that may be coming down the pipeline here.
Hey, I appreciate it. Yeah, man. I mean, like, I would like to draw some attention to a film that's, um, I think they're dealing with distribution and all that stuff. So I can't get into the legalities of that.
Mm.
But there's a movie that I was in called Out of Exile, and we shot it last year. And it's written by a guy named Kyle Kalika Harris. There's a cat named Kyle Jacob Henry, Wilson Novice. Tremendous local actors. But then also it's got like Peter Green, who was in Pulp Fiction, and Danny Boy, who was in House of Pain, and Jake the Snake Roberts is in it. Van Quattro, Haley McFarland, just a fantastic cast. And it was an awesome role for me. I get to play Gabriel Russell, who's kind of the backbone of the movie. It's a crime film. I'm really, really proud of it. I know they're hoping for that to come out, I believe, this summer. So please keep your eyes open for that. I wish that I could have gotten it for you to review. I think that you would dig it. It's probably my favorite role that I've been able to play. And there was just a lot of love that went into that, and it's a really well made. Ryan Merriman's in it as well. It's a really well made movie, so I definitely would recommend that. In fact, I was kind of stalling whenever we talked about getting together because I was wanting to see if I could get you a copy of it to check it out, but they can't hand that out yet. So that's out. Play It Loud is still going, and then I'm editing on Rough Cut 4, the finale.
Do you have a time frame as when you expect that could be possibly be released? Because I know you mentioned before this year, but do you have a time frame as far as when in the year you could expect it?
I'd like to try to premiere it maybe by the end of the summer, I think. And I'll definitely because I appreciate you watching Rough Cut. It is really close to my heart. So whenever I get it done, I'll send it to you.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
I'd love to get your take on it because you watched all three of them. I think there's a lot of little references, and there's a lot of build up. I mean, it was all built towards. This was supposed to be the end of the first season. Second season was supposed to be them actually filming the movie, but it's at a stopping place, and it's tragic, comedic, which fits with chasing any kind of dreams. You're either crying or laughing. It's just a matter of timing, I guess. So that's what I would point to. I've got a couple of other things that are in the pipe and cooking, but I just can't talk about them. But I'm working. I'm excited, and it's a true honor, man. And I want to say this, and I hope you hear it. To sit and talk with somebody who isn't just watching the clock, waiting for the bottom line, looking for the sound bites, asking easy questions. And I appreciate the way you put yourself out there as an interviewer by sharing your own opinions and perspectives and vulnerabilities. It makes it a lot easier to talk to you. And you're very respectful and very kind. And I just appreciate the opportunity to sit here with you. Thank you.
No, well, the honor is mine, man. Really, and if anything, again, I'm going to give you your flowers. Thank you, because it takes two to tango. So it makes it really easy for us to have this conversation, because we're cooperating and sharing these stories that we have here to share our battle scars, if you will. So again, I do want to say thank you again, and everything that you and I have discussed about here in reference to Rough Cut, Play It Loud, I'm going to have in the description down below, as well as I have for the review for Rough Cut, as well as in our previous conversation. I have all that information down. So if they miss it the first few stuff that I've done, they should have an excuse to miss it this time around, because it's all available for them to look into in the description there. So be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, for the cameras here, thank you very much, man. And hopefully we'll do this again down the line real soon.
Look forward to it, brother. Take care of yourself.